Hey, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Hello. Good morning to you all. Hello. Good morning.
Hey, Mark.
Good morning, everybody.
How are you?
Everybody staying sane?
A little bit.
A little bit.
You know, Mark, I'm having problems sleeping, and when I wake up thinking about this. So this is great.
It's not good. Doesn't feel like we're going anywhere right now, but I know a lot of people have that feeling.
My sanity is in moving around. I'm exercising, I'm cooking, I'm playing games, I'm outside. I just don't stay in any one place too long.
It's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Keep moving.
Yeah. People are joining up, signing in. This is one of a few different Zoom meetings that our temple has today. We have one tonight for our adult B'nai Mitzvah class. And we're going to have another, well, we have another one tomorrow night. But now the sun is right in my eyes. So I'm trying to find a place where I'm not getting sun. Right in my face. So everybody is, well, we're a month into this right now. So who would have thought?
And a month to go.
Maybe, we hope. No, still there. Still very much in the sun.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Hey, Reverend Lynn.
Good morning.
Did you have a good Easter?
Yeah. It's odd, but
Yeah.
it was good. How about Passover?
Well, this seems like an unending Passover, but I think it's just because every day seems unending. So it's making Passover feel even harder. But
Yeah.
I
sort of feel like we gave up church for Lent, you know.
Yeah. Did you have a hard time getting people? Did you have a hard time getting people on for Easter service? Did you have?
They said there were about 3,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big church. So I don't know what that means. It probably means people in Alaska and Hawaii and.
Wow. And did you know some of the people, or were they all?
Well, actually, they stopped doing the open mic thing because we had a problem last Sunday. It was really ugly.
So you had we thought it was just Jews that were getting.
Oh no, it was awful.
Well, there you go, Jews.
Racist slur crap.
It's not just happening to us. There you go. So
No.
that's sometimes Jews need to hear that it's not just crazy anti-Semites. There's people who
crazy anti-people.
People do that everywhere. That's a shame.
Yeah.
It's on one hand a shame, and it's on the other hand comforting.
I suppose. It means you must be doing something right, I guess.
We weren't targeted or picked out in particular. I think people actually kind of need to hear that, but we haven't had a problem yet. I guess we're not doing enough. No, now we have passwords for everything. So, but that was because Zoom made us. I would have been hesitant to do it until the very end.
Right.
To me, it seems like you're putting up barriers, obstacles.
I know.
But I know. I guess it's necessary.
Yeah,
I thought it was
someone needs to tell Marcia she's in the dark.
Marcia? Yeah, Marcia.
Marcia's in the dark.
You look like you're Darth Vader over there.
Or in witness protection.
Just like
That's it.
There you go.
And I'm not there at all.
No, you're not.
Down at the bottom, Phyllis.
There's a picture of you guys.
Lovely anniversary picture or something.
Anniversary picture. That's nice.
Okay, so what do I do down at the bottom?
Where it says stop video or start video. Click
Start
on that.
video.
Oh, I don't see that anywhere.
I've
Ronnie is
done
on
this
there.
2 times, so I'm an expert now.
We, my family and I, Mark's family and I, Mark, not
We're
that
not
Mark.
here. We're,
We had a tequila party Saturday afternoon.
Cool. Is that a Passover tradition at your house?
I did not realize tequila was kosher for Passover, so it is now.
Ah.
It's one of the few non-grain alcohols, so it's good to go. Tequila, rum. We talked about. We talked
I don't
about
remember tequila.
Vodka?
at the cooking class.
Vodka?
Potato vodka. It's got to be
Yeah,
potato.
Yeah, potato vodka.
But most
Hey,
vodkas
Judith.
are green.
Yes.
On Passover, we did it where anytime someone said the word matzah, you had to do wine shooters. So everybody kept going, matzah, matzah.
Marcia, close the shades behind you.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Oh, yeah.
It's bright.
So,
Yeah, see, you let me on there and I start directing.
That's okay.
We are sisters with other mothers, Phyllis. Yeah.
all right. Well,
It's a brother from
Turn your
another
light on,
mother.
maybe.
most of our crew is here. We're still getting We're still getting people coming in, but I'll keep an eye on it. I have to keep an eye on it once we start. Otherwise, people are sitting in the waiting room.
So even with the password, Mark, you have to let them in?
Something, it's one of those things where I think it's one of the settings. I guess if I take off waiting room.
It's one of the things they advise you to do, though.
Yeah.
Keep from getting bombed.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And they have now a security thing where you can lock the room down.
Mm.
So you can lock it up if you find.
The main thing is to make sure that only the host can share the screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
No. Every
So-
time we talk, we get on the screen.
No,
No, share
but
your
Oh, no, no.
computer screen.
Oh,
that keeps people from doing things they shouldn't do.
So now I'm going to try to take us on Facebook. I forgot. We're going to go live. I forgot. We are going to stream this little baby on Facebook for the people out there. And so we're ready to go. Oh, wait. I'm not sure. I'm going live. Wow. So yeah, we're in the midst of Passover. Everything else is going on. It almost seems like Passover is secondary. As Reverend Lynn said, it's almost like we gave up church for Lent. For us, Passover this year is taken on a whole different. There's a different focus. I think, at least for me, I feel it. Because normally, I look at the restrictions of Passover as I don't like them. I've said this many times. I don't like Passover food. I don't look forward to it. Some people do. I don't. For me, it always feels like Passover feels a little bit like a restricted period, like, oh, I gotta settle in for the restrictions. And now this year it's strange because I feel like, oh yeah, Thursday night we can go out to Italian food or do the things that we do to break the restrictions. And I'm like, who the hell cares if I get Italian food? I got to bring it in. I don't get to go out to eat. And
It's
then the
hard to
next
eat
day-
Italian food through the mask.
Yeah.
It's very messy.
Sauce gets all over. It's
Yeah, it looks awful.
Yes. So it's strange going from a restricted period of in the scheme of things, it seems pretty stupid that these are restrictions that I'm even concerned about. So it's strange. It's a very strange time for all of us. And Passover is taken on a whole new dimension for most of us, I think for all of us. Unless people really dig Passover food. I guess if you really like it, then you're feeling like this is a respite from what's going on around us.
I like the challenge.
I think I'm in enough challenge right now. I don't, no, I mean, listen, I mean,
I think clergy are having a hard time. Clergy in charge of congregations are having a very hard time.
Yeah,
You
yeah, I
can't
gotta tell you,
minister to your flock.
Right.
I'm quite fortunate because as of today, thank God, we have not had a serious situation regarding this. But it reminds me, I do have to jump off in an hour because I have a funeral today again, which was supposed to have been Friday and then got moved to Sunday and then got moved to Tuesday because of this. But I think it's more because of the staff and what's happening at cemeteries right now, dealing with not everybody. I want to just make this real clear. Not everybody that's coming into cemeteries right now are dying of corona. I mean, people are still dying. I mean, that's the thing we forget. People still have cancer, people still have heart disease, people still are having stroke. I mean, it's almost like that's all people are talking about, so that must be all people are suffering with, but it's not. Unfortunately, those people that are suffering in hospitals don't even have a chance to get visits right now because nobody can go into a hospital. So it's really, that's the aspect of this that's tough right now. The other thing that's tough is that the cemeteries are working in very strange ways in order to protect their employees, primarily really to protect their employees, because even if they did what they're doing with not letting the staff, the community in. So as I mentioned last week, I think you can't go into Eden right now. If you want to go visit your loved ones in the cemetery, it's shut. You can't go in. So you can go in for a service and then they let like 5 or 10 people in max. I haven't been in a service where we've had 10. We've had 4 or 5 people. The staff is primarily what they're concerned with right now, and so they are only having staff there as minimally as possible, and it's not a normal situation. Needless to say, with the staff there is, I think, really like hospitals at a level of fear, and I think what's also happening is essentially. I think there's this fear that if somebody comes in to the cemetery who's died of corona, they had a really bad, this is like a strain that, people start to get really panicky about, which I understand. I mean, I feel that. So, it worries me when I go there. So I'm not going into the office. I'm having very, minimal contact with, I mean, I'm real far apart from everybody, but I do understand what the staff feels like, because they have to touch the casket. I mean, there's no way for them not. You can't put a think about it. You can't put a casket on a forklift and move it around. So this is really hard on the staff there. It's hard on medical staff too. But quite frankly, I haven't been in a hospital in 3 weeks, so I'm not seeing it firsthand. I am seeing the cemeteries, unfortunately, firsthand. So again,
Locally, we don't have a lot of cases, fewer than 200.
Yeah. So I want to make it clear that I'm not, as far as I know, I may have done one service for somebody who had other complicating factors that died, but other than that, unfortunately, the woman who passed away today was another woman who was younger, and my guess is this didn't help, but she had cancer, but she was not, according to her longtime partner, she was not supposed to go like this. So yes, it's there. This is, when you think about what's happening with people who are ill. Yeah, there are a lot of people who are ill right now who don't have it and who are being affected by it because of what's happening.
Are they burying the Jews right away?
They are. No, I don't know if, to answer your question, I don't know if the Jewish tradition is helping getting those burials done faster. I'm not sure, because as I said, this funeral that I have today was supposed to be Friday, then it got moved to Sunday, and now it's on Tuesday. So I don't know if the Jewish community is kind of demanding it more, and so it's going in a quicker way. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if the Jewish factor is helping it. Sorry.
In New
What about the
York,
mass burials in New York?
yes, they're having mass, yeah,
Right.
like Potter's Field kind of things.
I don't
Right.
think that that's happening. I from what I understand, I asked the question from some people in New York. I don't think that's happening to people in the Jewish community whose bodies have been identified and whose families have claimed them. So if they've been claimed, that doesn't mean that, make it real clear, that doesn't mean that there are no Jewish folks that have been part of the mass burials. My guess is that there are, but those are people who have not been claimed. And Potter's Field is a real thing in New York. I mean, that's not a
The pictures from what, Hart Island?
what?
Hard Island, yeah.
From Hart Island.
Yeah, by Rikers.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's that when those kind of things happen, it sounds like we've gone back in time.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's probably seen the video of it, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It is happening. So with that in mind, in the middle of Passover, in the midst of pandemic, we're going to study a section of Midrash, which I've read a couple times over the last week, because there's parts of it that I can't even believe were written. We read some really, in the last few weeks, we've read some pretty interesting Midrash too, but this stuff today has got some interesting, there's some interesting stuff here. Yeah, you'll kind of be surprised that there's this written down. So we're going to start. We want to thank God for the mitzvah of studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asuk b'divrei Torah. We thank you for this mitzvah of studying Torah today together. So we're going to take a look at the text, and we are on Facebook. We are live on Facebook too. We want to welcome those people who are joining us through that platform. And let's take a look. So where we left off last week was we were looking at the blessings and the fact that Esau is determined after Jacob steals the blessing that he was going to kill Jacob, as we know, but he didn't want to kill Jacob while Isaac was still alive. Part of the reason the Midrash gives us, which the Torah doesn't tell us, but the Midrash adds, is that if Jacob dies, Isaac's still alive, he can still have another kid and then decide, hell, Esau's a killer, I'll give everything to this new third kid. So there was a precedent for it, we said, with Adam and Eve. So it gives you something that you maybe hadn't thought of before. But this relationship between the brothers, which gets worse after the blessing incident, is now going to take its next chapter. But we do want to point out, as we discussed last week, the idea that Jacob runs away right away is not where the Midrash obviously goes. There is some Midrashim which don't give us a huge time lag between this, but there is the Midrash, some of the Midrash that we're reading right now assumes that Jacob stays for 14 years in Canaan, in the land of Canaan, this part that we just read. He fled to the house of Eber, son of Shem, and concealed himself there for 14 years on account of his brother, that he continues to learn for 14 years, which is obviously a symbolic number, 2 sets of 7 years. But now we're going to kind of get to whether 14 years later or a month later or 2 days later that Jacob finally does flee. So that we're doing the flight of Jacob. That's a better way of saying it. So do we have Rosemary? Are you ready to read from Courageous?
Yep. Courageous. Courageous as he was, Jacob would not run away from danger. He said to his mother, I am not afraid. If he wishes to kill me, I will kill him. To which she replied, let me not be bereaved of both my sons in one day. By words, Rebekah again showed her prophetic gift. As she spoke, so it happened. When their time came, Esau was slain while the burial of Jacob was taking place.
So let's just explain that weird part right there. The line in quotes, let not me bereaved of both my sons in one day, is in the Torah. And it's a really powerful line when Rebecca says that. The implications, I always thought, the obvious, or maybe it's not the most obvious, but I think that on the surface of this, it seems like she says this to Jacob because she feels that Esau is now that is now going to be dead to her, that Esau will never want to have anything to do with her again. And if Jacob gets killed today, then she loses both of her kids, one physically and one emotionally, spiritually, whatever, for all intents and purposes, is lost. This is what it seems to be the case. The interesting thing is that there seems to be this understanding, like maybe both of them could die on the same day, and literally, like physically die the same day. Like both of them would give each other a fatal blow, or for whatever, however it would happen, they both be dead. What's interesting is the Midrash just threw out this idea that because Rebecca said that,
That's what happened.
it actually happens.
Hmm.
We don't know how Esau died. And the Midrash just gave us this strange Midrash, just for what it's worth. Esau, of course, is a violent person and lives a violent life, and he's going to get killed the day or within the day or so of when Jacob was buried, which of course he was buried after he died. He died in Egypt, but they brought the body. So essentially he comes up to be buried with his family, and then on that day Esau gets killed. It's just a weird Midrash that it, like Rebecca said it and it happened. That's what we just read. All right, let's keep going though.
And Jacob said to Rebekah, behold, you know that my father has become old and does not see. And if I leave him and go away, he will be angry and curse me. I will not go. If he sends me, only then will I go. Accordingly, Rebekah went to Isaac, and amid tears she spoke to him thus, if Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Heth, what good shall my life do me? And Isaac called Jacob and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. For thus did our father Abraham command us, according to the word of the Lord, which he had commanded him, saying, unto your seed will I give the land, if your children keep my covenant that I have made with you. Then will I also perform to your children that which I have spoken to you, and I will not forsake them. Now, therefore, my son, hearken to my voice, to all that I shall command you, and refrain from taking a wife from among the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Haran, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. Take heed lest you should forget the Lord your God in all his ways in the land to which you go, and should join yourself to the people of the land and pursue vanity and forsake the Lord your God. But when you come to the land, serve the Lord. Do not turn to the right or to the left from the way which I commanded you and which you learned. And may the Almighty God grant you favor before the people of the land, that you may take a wife there according to your choice, one who is good and upright in the way of the Lord. And may God give to you and your seed the blessing of your father Abraham, and make you fruitful and multiply you. And may you become a multitude of people in the land where you go. And may God cause you to return to your land, the land of your father's dwelling, with children and with great riches, with joy and with pleasure.
Wow. So that's a beautiful blessing that Isaac sends Jacob away with. And what's interesting is that we do hear this is the line essentially in the Torah. But here's the weird thing. Well, there's a few weird things. We have to deal with the fact that Jacob is doing something right now that is a dangerous undertaking. He's leaving the land, he's leaving the promised land. And so there's this recognition that he's in danger by simply leaving the land. And so what Isaac does here is says, look, I'm giving you permission to go. And this is a blessing that I'm giving you that your grandfather gave to me and I'm giving to you, which is that you will leave this land, you'll multiply, you'll do well in the land that you're going to, but you will come back. And you have to return to the land to our land. You have to come back home. So this is a little bit longer than the blessing as it exists in the Torah. So the Torah blessing is the Torah blessing's not as long. Actually, I'll show it to you since we have it open.
Mark, didn't we just read this somewhere else recently?
We may have discussed it and read a version of it. We may have read a version of it last week, or a little bit of foreshadowing.
Mhm.
So it says, Isaac sent for Jacob and blessed him and instructed him, saying, "You shall not take a wife from among the Canaanite women. Up to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take a wife from there among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May El Shaddai bless you, make you fertile and numerous, so that you will become an assembly of peoples. May he grant the blessing of Abraham to you and your offspring to possess the land where you are sojourning, which God has signed to Abraham." That's the whole text. So it's a little bit different in the Midrash. The Midrash text is a little different.
Sort
But
of fleshed out.
Yeah, it's basically, yeah, exactly. It's the way the Midrash kind of, adds the, filler fleshed out. So this is the blessing that he gets. The interesting thing is that this is another example of Rebecca manipulating the situation to get what needs to happen. So the blessing here, goes all the way. It's, quite a bit longer in the Midrash, but the core of it's the same. But I do want to just point out that in the Torah, the way the part begins to remind people is Rebecca said to Isaac, "I'm disgusted with my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries a Hittite woman like these from among the native women, what good will life be to me?" Which is the Midrash quoted it verbatim. So you can see that it's Rebecca who gets Isaac to do this. And she doesn't say to Isaac, "Let's get Jacob to a safe place." The Torah seems to be right away telling you that's what this is about. Because this comes after Rebecca says to Jacob, "Go to my brother, wait for your brother's fury to subside, then I will fetch you from there. Let me not lose both of you in one day." So in the Torah, it really shows that Rebecca is trying to save Jacob. She's manipulating the situation so that Jacob will survive. Which, by the way, seems to imply that Isaac didn't think about this. Isaac doesn't. This isn't Isaac doing this. I mean, Isaac agrees to it, but Isaac doesn't initiate it. And the question you have to think, what did Isaac think was going to happen to Jacob after the blessing, got switched? What did Isaac think was, like, if he didn't do anything, what was going to happen to Jacob? I mean, that at least should sit in the back of your mind somewhere. What was going on with Isaac in this? So, yeah.
Just that Isaac is always a passive character.
Yeah.
Acted
At the very least, he's passive. In this case, his passivity could lead to his son, who he just gave this important blessing to, being killed. So it's strange. It's at the very least disconcerting that this is what Isaac gives us as far as as far as defending his children from danger.
It's like he has incredible spiritual power to bless people, but he doesn't have any earthly powers to protect people.
Yeah, and he doesn't seem to understand what's going on, which I did thank you for saying that, because it does remind us of the part that you started with, which is Jacob seems to be fully cognizant of it when he says, exactly, "Behold, my father has become ill, he can't see," so that Jacob recognizes it, Rebecca recognizes it. They're all dealing with a father and husband who isn't capable, either he's never been capable or he's definitely in this situation not capable of taking any action. It's a really interesting dynamic. It's one that, you know, anyone who's been a part of a family knows this happens. This isn't ancient tale of you know, of
It's
our
not
legendary
lore.
ancestors. This happens today. This happens, unfortunately. I'm dealing with one of these situations personally right now, this very minute. So this when you read these kind of texts about fathers and sons and mothers and brothers and everything else, there's sometimes when you read this where it gives you an eerie chill. So again, and I am in no means alone or unique in that matter. If anybody's ever dealt with sibling rivalry and also specifically sibling issues or parental issues when parents are aging, this is real stuff. And it's
We have two sons who don't speak to each other.
yeah, this hits. I mean, it hits home. So
As the mother, of course, I blame it on the wives, but
well, so does you're in good company.
sons could not be wrong.
So does Rebecca. Rebecca does the same thing. So
I'm with Rebecca.
I every time you read the Torah and every time you read the Midrash, if you don't come away with a deep admiration, respect, love Rebecca, you don't get it, because the Torah gets it, the Midrash gets it, the rabbi, which means the rabbis who are all, from what we know, all men, they got it. You don't walk away with this without a deep, abiding admiration for Rebecca, her mind, her ability to basically see a situation and react and do what needs to be done, and at the same time honestly trying to not to do their best by everybody and not be a person who is kind of really, as some people oftentimes are, really uncaring about the consequences. She seems to be deeply cognizant and sympathetic to the consequences and to all the parties involved. So again, I think Rebecca to me is one of the great heroes in the entire Bible, not just Genesis, but really one of the great examples of humanity in the Bible, because her life isn't easy, and the rabbis recognize it thousands of years ago. She's a complicated character. She's got a whole lot of stuff working against her in some ways, but she doesn't give up, and she seems to be, again, a hero by every measure. So let's go back to what happens to Isaac here.
As the value of a document is attested by its concluding words, the signature of the witnesses, so Isaac confirmed the blessing he had bestowed upon Jacob, that none might say Jacob had secured it by intrigue and cunning. He blessed him again with 3 blessings in these words: insofar as I am endowed with the power of blessing, I bestow blessings upon you. May God, with whom there is endless blessing, give you his, and also the blessing wherewith Abraham desired to bless me, desisting only in order not to provoke the jealousy of Ishmael.
Wow. So wait a second. So Isaac blesses Jacob again, as we have read, and the Midrash points out something really interesting here, which is that this blessing is really a special blessing, because this was eyes wide open blessing. This was Isaac knowing exactly who he's blessing, and the Bible, kind of tells us he gets blessed again, which, wait, he just, he got a blessing in the previous paragraphs. Why does he need another blessing? So the rabbis point out, well, just so you would never say the blessing was not a real blessing, that it was a blessing of deception. No, he's given him a blessing, and it's powerful for all these reasons, including it's the blessing of Abraham. It's the blessing, it's a blessing that was, from kind of the complete blessing that is, if I have any blessing at all, this is it. So it's a, they're basically saying that is a really powerful blessing. even though it doesn't seem like the most powerful blessing, they're basically saying this is the blessing that not only is a blessing in itself, but seals the deal of the previous blessing. So this is like the document. This is like the signing of the document of the document being the previous blessing. So this is the document being signed, meaning the previous blessing. So it's not a blessing just in itself. It hits the previous blessing too. All right.
Seeing with his prophetic eye that the seed of Jacob would once be compelled to go into exile, Isaac
May I interrupt?
Isaac offered up one more petition, that God would bring the exiles back again. He said, "He shall deliver you in 6 troubles, and in the 7th there shall no evil touch you." And also Rebekah prayed to God in behalf of Jacob. "O Lord of the world, let not the purpose prosper which Esau harbors against Jacob. Put a bridle upon him, that he accomplish not all he wills to do."
Okay. So a couple of things. The first is when the rabbis are writing about this, they're thinking about their own world. They're thinking about how do these blessings relate to them? And so there seems to be within this blessing a recognition that the Jews are going to go through some tough times. And that this blessing is not just a blessing for Jacob, but for us, for everybody who comes after. So this is, we think about, we just sang Had Gad Yah. We just sang this song about this goat, which also on another level, the song about the goat is also a song about the exile. And it's a song about, it's a metaphor for all the kingdoms that came against us and took over from the previous person and whatever. So that the song is about, the Greeks, the Persians, the Romans, goes on and on, right? Well, the problem is when does it end? Who's the angel of death? The more modern in the last 50 years, it's the Holocaust. So was the 7th trouble, the Holocaust? Unfortunately, there's always, that trouble was, we don't count that trouble. So we're now at 7. Everybody wants to say this is we're not going to live through another trouble. So this has been kind of the prophetic, the play on this that's been going on for thousands of years. When do these troubles end? And again, when the rabbis wrote it, 1,500 years ago, they thought their troubles were over. Well, this was written before the Crusades. It was written before the Inquisition. It was written before the pogroms. It was written before the Holocaust. So, at what point do we say, you should be comforted to know that Jacob's descendants, you and I, are not going to have to deal with this anymore. So that's part of it. There's also this interesting thing here, which is that Ishmael is also brought into this blessing situation, which is that Isaac can only bless Jacob in as much as there's only so much of Abraham's blessing around. And if Ishmael has some of the blessing right now, I can't give you that blessing. I can only give you the blessing part that I have. So there's this interesting idea that these blessings are super powerful. They go through generations and they affect peoples. They affect not just the person, but all their descendants as well. So let's take a look at what happens when this next blessing happens, the final blessing, if you will.
When Esau observed that even his father's love had passed from him to Jacob, he went away to Ishmael, and he addressed him as follows: "Lo, as your father gave all his possessions to your brother Isaac and dismissed you with empty hands, so my father purposes to do to me. Make yourself ready then. Go forth and slay your brother, and I will slay mine, and then we two shall divide the whole world between us." And Ishmael replied, "Why do you want me to slay your father? You can do it yourself." Esau said, "It has happened before that a man killed his brother. Cain murdered Abel, but that a son should kill his father is unheard of."
Okay, so this is the part that I said, you're not going to believe that there's a midrash like this.
Weird.
Because this is just the beginning of this section, okay? So this is, I mean, it's pretty powerful. It's a pretty good story. I'd like to see this movie, But this is
It's called Strangers on a Train.
well, no, it's worse than that. This is more Game of Thrones than anything, because what seems to be happening here is this pact, right? It is a pact for death, except here in this case, the pact is crazier, because what happens is that if both of them kill their brothers, then they get to split the world. So the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Esau get everything if Isaac and Jacob are killed. So it's not like a secret pact, like Hitchcockian pact. It's a pact of ambitions, of global ambitions. And that what happens is that Abraham's blessing, if you will, Abraham's powers get split between the two of them. So it's really an interesting imagination of what could have happened if Esau and Ishmael did this right away.
Mhm.
I mean, so a couple things before we get into what happens here. I mean, you already heard Ishmael rebuffs him, but first of all, they're playing on the rest of Genesis, because they talked about Cain and Abel, and they said, hey, Esau says, hey, there's a precedent for a brother killing a brother, but who's ever heard of a son killing his father? You got to do it, because we don't know what's going to happen. We know what happens to the brother who kills a brother. You wind up being Cain, and you can live with that, right? But who knows? Who knows what happens if a father is killed by a son? Who knows what happens to the son? So, what is this even based on? It's based on a seemingly innocuous and even to some extent positive scene in the Torah itself. Because what it says is that after Isaac gives Jacob this blessing, it says, when Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him off to Padan Aram to take a wife from there, charging him as he blessed him, you shall not take a wife from the Canaanite women, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padan Aram, Esau realized that Canaanite women displeased his father Isaac. So Esau went to Ishmael, took to wife, in addition to the wives he had, Mahalat, the daughter of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, sister of Mahalat is the sister of Nebaioth. So it seems as though, on the face of it, that Esau just kind of did a nice thing, which is said, hey, I know my parents. If you noticed carefully, didn't say anything about his mother. He said he realizes that his dad doesn't like this, that he did something to please his dad. He did something, if you will, traditional, which is, I'm going to marry within the family. I'm not going to marry a Canaanite woman anymore. I'm going to marry an Ishmaelite. By the way, it also says, and this is kind of where the Midrash launches from, that Esau finally feels like he's not the favored son anymore, at least, Isaac's favored son. And so he's reacting to his father not loving him the same way anymore, not favoring him the same way anymore, which, by the way, because Esau is such a bad person, that's enough to launch him into parricide. All right. Any questions or comments? Let's read what happens then.
Esau did not really shrink back from parricide, only it chanced not to fit the plan he had hatched. If Ishmael slays my father, he said to himself, I am the rightful redeemer, and I shall kill Ishmael to avenge my father. And if then I murder Jacob too, everything will belong to me as the heir of my father and my uncle.
So let's pause right there. So what it's really saying is, no, Esau didn't want to split anything with Ishmael. He wanted it all himself, because if Ishmael kills his father, then he can kill Ishmael. Then he has a right to kill him.
So what's weird about it is you're saying, well, what about Jacob if he kills Jacob? But Jacob doesn't have any heirs at this point. Jacob doesn't have any children. So who would avenge? There's nobody to avenge Jacob. He'd be the avenger. So if he kills Jacob, then there's nobody left to avenge. I mean, I guess you could say Rebecca could seek vengeance on him, but you know, he basically is saying, my mother's the last person on earth who can avenge me. Does everybody see that? I mean, do you understand it?
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
but I mean, what's obviously going on here is that in Torah, Esau is a sympathetic.
Wait, I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Okay.
Asa, yeah.
In Torah, Esau is a sympathetic character at times.
Yeah.
The rabbis are transforming him into a totally evil character. So
Yeah.
they're fulfilling a certain agenda here with the Midrash.
Oh, for sure.
But
For
why?
sure. But what they do it, and they do it in such a brilliantly complex and not so obvious way, taking cues from the text, but they're able to construct a story which again seems counter to what's even happening here, which is that Esau wakes up one day realizing now, oh, I've been doing the wrong thing. Now, again, on the face of it, maybe you could say Esau should have been aware, but he doesn't. You could also say, look, you know, it's a parent's job to convey to the son what you're supposed to do. Maybe Isaac never conveyed it to him. Maybe Isaac enabled him and never conveyed it to him. So again, yeah, he's a somewhat sympathetic character. The rabbis have a different agenda, but they're playing within the rules. They're not going to leave the rules of what they have. And so they have these rules, including a rule of blood avenger, which is that somebody is allowed to avenge the death, the murder of their loved one, which, by the way, then again, getting back to the original Cain and Abel references, this is part of the issue with the Cain and Abel story, which the original writers of the Torah, I mean, it's part of the Torah's problem, which is when Cain kills Abel, who can avenge Abel? There's no vengeance that can be taken out because there's nobody there. And so it creates this kind of dilemma of what happens in the future. And so God does something strange. He gives Cain a mark, right? And the mark, to some extent, isn't, hey, this is a guy that you can avenge yourself on because you're the relatives of Abel, and you can avenge Abel, but you specifically are not allowed to avenge with Cain. You're not supposed to kill Cain, and the mark protects him from being avenged. So it's a weird rule, but you better understand what the mark of Cain is when you remember that this law of vengeance, of blood vengeance, was an operation during the biblical period, less so in the rabbinic period, but was still, everybody knew it was in the Torah. So again, keep that in mind, as all we know from the Torah is that Esau went and married a daughter of Ishmael, which is at least a descendant of Abraham. Actually, you can make the argument Mahalat is a closer relation to Hebrews than Rachel and Leah. Because Rachel and Leah are not descendants of Abraham, right? They're descendants of Nahor. They're Abraham's brother's kids. Mahalat is a direct descendant of Abraham through Ishmael. So keep that in mind. I mean, and the rabbis knew that. The rabbis kind of knew in the back of their minds, hey, doesn't Mahalat, why didn't Jacob and Esau, or specifically Jacob, why didn't Jacob marry Ishmaelite women? At least they're Abraham's line. So keep that in mind. Okay.
This shows that Esau's marriage with Mahalat, the daughter of Ishmael and grandchild of Abraham, was not concluded out of regard for his parents, who were opposed to his two other wives, daughters of the Canaanites. All he desired was to enter into amicable relations with Ishmael in order to execute his devilish plan.
Yeah. So don't think that he married a daughter of a descendant of Ishmael because he cared about the lineage or of his keeping it, out of the Canaanite, keeping our bloodline out of the Canaanites. He did it because he was in a pact. He wanted to be in a pact with Ishmael. Okay.
But Esau reckoned without his host. The night before his wedding with Mahalat, Ishmael died, and Nebaioth, the son of Ishmael, stepped into his father's place and gave away his sister. How little it had been in Esau's mind to make his parents happy by taking a granddaughter of Abraham to wife appears from the fact that he kept his 2 other wives, the Canaanitish women. The daughter of Ishmael followed the example of her companions, and thus she but added to the grief caused the parents of Esau by their daughters-in-law. And
There you go, Reverend Lynn.
Damn right.
I promised you that Rebecca speaks to us.
Well, I've been very lucky with my daughters-in-law so
Thank
far.
you.
They're
Oh, I
angels.
like both of them.
And the
I like
opportunity
them.
might have been a most favorable one for Esau to turn aside from his godless ways and amend his conduct, for the bridegroom is pardoned on his wedding day for all his sins committed in years gone by.
Okay, let's just pause after that for 1 second. 1 second.
You get married, you're gonna get out of jail free card.
What did you just read? Yeah,
This is
interesting
convoluted.
idea here that everything that happened before you got married, everybody forgets about that once you get married. It's good to know. Maybe explains why some people wait a really long time to get married. But yeah, essentially all that sowing of your oats,
All those wild oats are forgiven.
they're forgiven.
The bride doesn't get that, does she?
No,
That's
she doesn't even get married. But interestingly enough, Esau would have gotten a pass at his wedding day because of this. So the Midrash is coming off of a strange line, which is, why does it mention Nebaioth in the line? Why does it mention it? And their answer is that Ishmael dies that day, and so Nebaioth kind of takes the place of the father in giving away his sister in this case. What's the basis for this? Well, there's a very famous Midrash we're going to read next week about Jacob. Oh no, I actually read it. Sorry, we read the story. It's Rebecca's brother Laban taking over from Bethuel, her father, during her wedding, her given away. Remember the story of the poison that they tried to poison Eliezer, and instead Bethuel got poisoned, and Laban took over and ended up giving away his sister Rebecca. So there's a
This really is Game of Thrones.
yeah, it's crazy stuff, and the rabbis write it like you don't like almost that stuff happens, and it did. I mean, when the rabbis were writing this, Game of Thrones is a really, really, really tame version of what the Romans were doing.
Yeah.
And
Truth
so,
is stranger than fiction.
yep. And so for them, this was not beyond the realm of what happens, because it was happening with the Romans, and then it happened with the Maccabees. The Maccabees and King Herod were doing the same kinds of stuff. So this wasn't just the Romans; it was happening in their own backyard, and it happened. I mean, it happened with the Maccabean king. I mean, so every time the Jews turned around, and it happened to King David, maybe not as bad as this, but pretty bad. This is not out of the realm of what could happen, and so they say it like these stories play out. These are the consequences. And again, there's a whole lot of don't marry Canaanite women here. That's we didn't really belabor that point, but it's a big part of it is the Canaanite daughters-in-law are a big problem for Rebecca and Isaac. And according to what we just read, even this Ishmaelite woman, Mahalat, she gets corrupted by the other women in the tent who are teaching her the ways of the Canaanites. So even if she would have been a good wife, she ain't a good wife now. So this is part of the problem of Esau. And again, what isn't there in the text, the rabbis are going to have a field day with. And this next section, which again, I apologize, we're going to have a condensed section today, but it is going to get, I told you there's some good stuff in here. This is some good stuff, and it's going to get continue. I don't know if it gets better than, I'm going to have this wedding so that I can have my dad killed, and my brother killed too. But there's some weird stuff coming up here with Esau. So
Is there a reason that it says parricide rather than patricide?
yeah, because he's talking about killing. Oh yeah, that's right. Why is it parricide and not patricide there? I think that's maybe just a spelling. Yeah, it's a spelling.
Is that a translation problem, or?
I'll defer to Rosemary. She seems to know about these kinds of things.
I really don't know. Can't
No,
answer that one.
parricide is killing your parent.
Right.
Well, parent, but patricide is more specific.
Killing
Like
your
Matt,
father.
Maybe maybe
Side
I
is
know what person
a
we don't know.
parent.
This is translated, isn't it? I mean, it wasn't written.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a Hebrew word for killing your father. I know, I'm serious. I mean, I think it could have been killing your parent, and then I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a Hebrew word specifically. I can tell you there isn't for killing your father. So,
But there is for killing a parent.
yeah. Well, wait. There's one for killing a parent, and there's one specifically for killing your father. I mean, and for killing your mother. I mean, matricide and patricide.
But is that true in Hebrew?
No, it's not for sure. So somebody translated it as killing a parent, and maybe that was what it said. Maybe it didn't say killing the father. I do think it's relative, since we've already pointed it out. These are Latin words, so it shows you the Romans had words for it. The Jews didn't. It didn't happen enough. If the Romans had a word for it, it's probably because it happened enough that they needed to have a word.
Because they used a lot, right?
Yeah. So patricide, matricide, parricide. Fratricide. Yeah, they had a lot of sides, man. There was a lot of siding going on, and Jews did, it's like the Eskimo words for snow or ice or whatever. So we got a lot of words for it. We have multiple words for certain things, and when you see that, it is kind of telling, because there's different, because we see the variations of it. It's all, for Jews, maybe it was all murder, so we didn't have to specify one versus one against another. But yeah, it's interesting when you have lots of words for stuff. It usually means it's important to you, that these are things that you value. If you have a lot of words for them, think about it. We have what do we have a lot of words for in our country, in our society today? What are things?
In Yiddish, they have a word for your daughter's parents, the
Machatonim. Yeah.
We don't have words for them.
No, we don't. There are things, and there should be. I noticed this, somebody pointed this out. In Hebrew, we have words for being a mourner, different words for being a mourner. So, geez, I don't want to get too depressing and deep, but maybe for centuries of being a victim, you come up with lots of words for being on the wrong side of death, if you will. The Romans were usually, had a chance to be on both sides. And so maybe they had more words for killing and for dying. Jews had a lot of words for dying. We have words that, like, we have different words for different stages of mourning. So yeah, so we don't even have words like Phyllis was saying, we don't even have words for that. And so it's interesting that family relationships, mourning, things that are important to Jews, we've got words for them. Like, we have a word for, like, if you're an orphan, right? We know that means you lost your parents. If you lose a child in Hebrew, there's a word for that. We don't have a word for that in English. If you're bereft of a child, we say you're bereft of a child. Anyways, I didn't want to get too off topic. I want to read this section here before we wrap up. But it is interesting. Think about that. Maybe we'll come back to that next. So that's an assignment for next week. Think about what we have a lot of words for in our society, and what does that say about us? We have a lot of words for money in our society. We do. We have a lot of money. They're actually not. They're all just nicknames. But if we had words for different ways of money, of like we have cash on hand, or we have, we have money coming to us. But I don't know.
Getting sick.
Getting sick? Yeah. I don't know. Think about it. Think about it for next week. Let's read Jacob pursued by Eliphaz and Esau. This is a weird thing, and I wanted to get to it today. It's definitely connected to Jacob on the run. Okay.
When Jacob went away to go to Haran, Esau called his son Eliphaz and secretly spoke to him, saying, "Now hasten, take your sword in your hand and pursue Jacob and pass before him in the road and lurk for him and slay him with your sword in one of the mountains and take all belonging to him and come back." And Eliphaz was dexterous and an expert with a bow, as his father had taught him, and he was a noted hunter in the field and a valiant man. And Eliphaz did as his father had commanded him. And Eliphaz was at that time 13 years old, and he rose and went and took 10 of his mother's brothers with him and pursued Jacob. And he followed Jacob closely. And when he overtook him, he lay in ambush for him on the borders of the land of Canaan, opposite to the city of Shechem. And when Jacob saw Eliphaz and his men pursuing him, and Jacob stood in the place in which he was going in order to know what it was, for he did not understand their purpose, Eliphaz drew his sword and went on advancing, he and his men, towards Jacob. And Jacob said to them, "Why have you come hither, and why do you pursue me with your swords?" Eliphaz came near to Jacob and answered as follows: "Thus did my father command me, and now therefore I will not deviate from the orders which my father gave me." And when Jacob saw that Esau had impressed his command urgently upon Eliphaz, he approached and supplicated Eliphaz and his men, saying, "Behold, all that I have, and that which my father and mother gave to me, take unto you and go from me, and do not slay me. And may this thing that you will do with me be accounted to you as righteousness." And the Lord caused Jacob to find favor in the sight of Eliphaz and his men. And they hearkened to the voice of Jacob, and they did not put him to death, but took all his belongings, together with his silver and gold that he had brought with him from Beersheba. They left him nothing.
Let's pause right there. Let's decompress what we've read so far.
Eliphaz is 13, he has men and he has fortune and.
Yeah. So it's a kind of a problem here, which is Eliphaz seems to be well advanced beyond his years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first of all, the rabbis could have said he could have been older because, Jacob isn't even married yet, but Esau has already started a family. But Eliphaz, who is Esau's firstborn, and we read about him later on, and we read the list of Esau's descendants. We read about Eliphaz briefly. He's just mentioned once. He as the eldest son, he's basically sent out to kill his uncle, which again, they basically say he's like his father and that he knows how to use weapons really well. He's kind of scary, and he's not by himself. But he is kind of representing the family, and it's also Esau now being able to kill Jacob, but not get the blood on his hands directly. There's so much here. You already get the impression. There's something going on here with Eliphaz. There's by the way, another version of this Midrash that Eliphaz actually was a student, had studied with Jacob, that Jacob had kind of mentored Eliphaz like a rabbi. Actually, that's one of the Midrashim, is that it actually says Jacob was Eliphaz's rabbi. And then when he comes after him, he's able to talk him down by basically saying, "Look, I know you have to honor your father, but you're going to kill somebody, and you can't honor your father if you're going to kill somebody. He talks him down that way. Does anybody want to guess why this story exists, though? Why do we have this midrash?
Well, one reason might be because Jacob shows up at Haran penniless.
That's the reason. Very good. Well, thank you for that astute answer. Yeah, it answers the question. How could Jacob show up at the house of his uncle with nothing? He's going to get a bride, but he doesn't have anything. Why doesn't he have anything? That's why. He gets robbed. He gets robbed by his nephews, that they rob him. That's real important. It answers the question. Why would Jacob have had to work for his wife in the first place? Should have had money. Should have come there with money. So that's one thing. Anybody else have any other answers for why Eliphaz in particular is the one who does this? Anybody? Does anybody know who Eliphaz? Eliphaz is famous in the Bible for one of his descendants in particular. It's a pretty good one if anybody knows. I'll be mighty impressed with your knowledge of the Edomites.
Come on, Ronnie.
What? Yep.
Come on, Ronnie.
I'm going to get to chapter 36 in a second.
I mean, the only one I can think of, a wild guess would be Ruth.
Nope. Nope, but that is a good guess. Because she's Moabite. These are Edomites. And we have this weird chapter, which, I mean, you talk about chapters in the Bible that you got to scratch your head on. And the rabbis definitely scratch their head on this.
Amalek?
Who said that? Who's on that?
Amalek?
Yes.
That's me.
Very good, Judith.
Thank you.
We have this wonderful chapter 36 in Genesis. I love Genesis. But there's a chapter in there that defies explanation. It's chapter 36, and it's the line of Edom. It's Esau's descendants. And we actually, somebody thousands of years ago thought we needed to know who Esau's descendants are. So probably because the Edomites were our neighbors and they were our relations, and let's include something about them. But it says who Esau's wives are. It says his wife is Adah, and his other wife is daughter and Aholibamah, which is interesting because somewhere else she's got a different name, right? So no, Adad has a different name. It's Judith in a different place. And then it says that she marries, and he's also married to Basimath, which is different than the other name, Mahalat. So these names are different names. So it says, Adah bore to Esau Eliphaz, Basimath bore Reuel. So it goes through the next generation. And we go a little further. They settled in Seir, the area of Edom, which is in modern-day Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And here is the important line right here. Timnah was a concubine of Esau's son Eliphaz, and she bore Amalek to Eliphaz. These are the descendants of Esau's wife, Adah. And then it goes through the next ones. But this is the descendants of Esau through Eliphaz, Amalek, our great enemy. So our great enemy is descendant from Eliphaz. That's why I brought this midrash. Because of Eliphaz and who his descendants are. Yep. Let's go a little bit further.
Okay.
Eliphaz. I'm going to go up here.
Okay.
Eliphaz.
Eliphaz and his men returned to Esau and told him all that had happened to them with Jacob. He was wroth with his son Eliphaz and with his men because they had not put Jacob to death. And they answered and said to Esau, because Jacob supplicated us in this matter not to slay him, our pity was moved toward him, and we took all belonging to him, and we came back. Esau then took all the silver and gold which Eliphaz had taken from Jacob, and he put them by in his house.
Yeah, so he took the money.
Nevertheless, Esau did not give up the hope of intercepting Jacob on his flight and slaying him. He pursued him, and with his men occupied the road along which he had to journey to Haran. There, a great miracle happened to Jacob. When he observed what Esau's intention was, he turned off toward the Jordan River, and with eyes directed to God, he cleft the waters with his wanderer's staff and succeeded in crossing to the other side. But Esau was not to be deterred. He kept up the pursuit and reached the hot springs at Baarus before his brother, who had to pass by there. Jacob, not knowing that Esau was on the watch for him, decided to bathe in the spring, saying, I have neither bread nor other things needful, so I will at least warm my body in the waters of the well. While he was in the bath, Esau occupied every exit, and Jacob would surely have perished in the hot water if the Lord had not caused a miracle to come to pass. A new opening formed of itself, and through it Jacob escaped. Thus were fulfilled the words, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burnt. For Jacob was saved from the waters of the Jordan and from the fire of the hot spring.
Yeah. So here's again another example of the Torah, Midrash bringing in other parts of the Bible. This is a line from Isaiah. It's a beautiful passage which seems to be directed at Isaiah in Isaiah's time, for us, forever. But they actually made it go backwards. They made the line, when you pass through the waters, I'll be with you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burnt. They made it from Jacob's time. That actually was said for the first time then. So again, these are Jacob getting away from his brother. It's reminiscent of David getting away from King Saul. It's reminiscent of of Elijah getting away from King Ahav. There's stories of people being pursued in the Bible elsewhere, which are kind of adventure, scary, dramatic, different incidents. Here we have one. Again, you don't have it in the Bible at all, but the rabbis have amped up Jacob's flight, and here's what we got. So this is why Jacob winds up with nothing, where he comes to his father-in-law's house with nothing. So there's nothing in the Bible about a hot spring and about, this kind of spiritual moment that he has of being in the water, and they're all beautiful stories, but there's nothing in the Bible that would even lend itself to that, other than he shows up with nothing. Well, and of course that he's going to have a dream. Yeah.
At the same time with Jacob, a rider, leaving his horse and leg on the shore, had stepped off into the river to cool off, but he was overwhelmed by the waves, and he met his death. Jacob put on the dead man's clothes, mounted his horse, and went off. It was a lucky chance, for Eliphaz had stripped him of everything, even his clothes, and the miracle of the river had happened only that he might not be forced to appear naked among men.
That goes even further. They had no clothes, but thankfully some guy died and he put on a dead man's clothes. Now this is starting to sound more and more like a Clint Eastwood movie or something like that. I mean, this is spaghetti western level of somebody being literally stripped of everything. Yep.
Though Jacob was robbed of all his possessions, his courage did not fail him. He said, "Should I lose hope in my Creator? I set my eyes upon the merits of my fathers. For the sake of them, the Lord will give me his aid." And God said, "Jacob, you put your trust in the merits of your fathers. Therefore, I will not suffer your foot to be moved. He that keeps you will not slumber. Yea, still more. While a keeper watches only by day as a rule and sleeps by night, I will guard you day and night. For behold, he that keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep.
Yeah.
The Lord will keep you from all evil, from Esau as well as Laban. He will keep your soul, that the angel of death do you no hurt. He will keep your going out and your coming in. He will support you now you are leaving Canaan, and when you return to Canaan. Jacob was
Psalm
So
21.
again, you can see that this is Jacob's kind of prevision of God. He hasn't had his dream yet, which he's about to have on his way out. But they're basically like setting this up, And again, it brings in another line of the Bible, really famous line from Psalm 121.
Right.
The Lord neither slumbers nor sleeps. And why? Because Jacob shows his courage in this instant. And again, it doesn't seem like Jacob really did anything other than get out of town. But the rabbis give this whole layer of how dangerous this was, how lucky he was to survive. And on top of it, that he shows his faith in God in a way that, like, I don't want to say we get the exact opposite, but when we read next week, we'll look at the Torah. It doesn't seem like Jacob fully understands that God has been watching him the whole time. The rabbis are never going to give us any inclination of that. They basically are saying Jacob's been a student of Torah. He's showing his faith. He's doing everything else. The Bible seems to give us this idea that it's not until this moment that Jacob's actually put into a decision where he's got to put his faith in God, that he actually does have any sense of spirituality, that he has any sense of something bigger. And by the way, when we're going to read his dream and what happens to him, it's a conditional vow. He basically says to God, hey, if you take care of me, I'll take care of you. So again, the Bible doesn't give us this. The Midrash definitely does. So let's finish this up.
Jacob was reluctant to leave the Holy Land before he received direct permission from God. My parents, he reflected, bade me go forth and sojourn outside of the land, but who knows whether it is the will of God that I do as they say, and beget children outside of the Holy Land. Accordingly, he betook himself to Beersheba. There, where the Lord had given permission to Isaac to depart from Canaan and go to Philistia, he would learn the will of the Lord concerning himself. He did not follow the example of his father and grandfather and take refuge with Abimelech, because he feared the king might force him also into a covenant and make it impossible for his descendants of many generations to take possession of the Philistine land. Nor could he stay at home because of his fear that Esau might wrest the birthright and the blessing from him, and to that he could not and would not agree. He was as little disposed to take up the combat with Esau, for he knew the truth of the maxim, he who courts danger will be overcome by it. He who avoids danger will overcome it. Both Abraham and Isaac had lived according to this rule. His grandfather had fled from Nimrod, and his father had gone away from the Philistines.
Yep. And next week, we're going to continue. But I want to end with this, because this is a really good message for us today. You put on your mask and you go outside and you do whatever you need to do. Just remember something. Judaism has a different take on God and God's protection than other religions. For those people that were holding services and saying, hey, God's going to protect me and I can do anything I want because, I answer to a higher authority and everything else. There's an interesting,
Kansas.
There's an interesting principle in Judaism, which is don't go looking for danger. And one could say that the Jews have followed that maxim maybe to a fault, right? That when your parents tell you, I don't want you to play football, I don't want you to do this, I don't want you to do that, literally wrapping their kids in bubble wrap. There, we maybe went too far in some cases, but there is this idea in Judaism that God protects those who protect themselves. It's not just God helps those who help themselves. God protects those who protect themselves. Don't go looking for it. And so that's what Jacob does. Jacob does that, and he does something that the Torah points out that his father and grandfather didn't do, which is he doesn't make a pact with the Philistines. He doesn't make a pact with the people in the land. By avoiding that, he's basically now not putting his descendants into a situation where they have to give anything over to anybody else because Abraham and Isaac did that for their own safety. You could make the argument they actually put themselves at a delayed taking of the land. And so by Jacob not doing that, by Jacob fleeing, he's able to avoid that. And so Jacob does a lot of things by leaving the land. But interestingly, he's not sure whether he's even supposed to. His parents have given him permission, but has God given him permission? And so this makes Jacob look even holier than you even thought. Like if you thought Jacob was holy, wait, it gets even better because he's not sure that he's even supposed to go, even with his parents' blessings. So Jacob is trying to figure all these things out. Do I leave? Do I stay? Do I go? Do I make a pact with people? What do I do? And so next week we're going to read why God appears to him in the dream and says, this is what you got to do. But again, the rabbis are going to, as Ronnie's pointed out several times, they're going to completely whitewash Jacob. Jacob literally comes out of this looking completely different than the Torah makes us see him. And so you're going to see a different version of Jacob that's almost unrecognizable from the Torah. Jacob doesn't have really all his faults are flipped around and made into positives. So, and they go so far as to even to some extent dirtying Abraham and Isaac a little bit here by saying that Jacob didn't do these things that his father and grandfather did. So keep that in mind. That's one of the things that the rabbis are also doing here, is making Jacob look really good, because he's our ancestor. Abraham and Isaac are ancestors for other people. Jacob is our ancestor, and only, he's our ancestor, nobody else's. So he's cool. Everything he does.
I need a genealogy.
What?
I need a genealogy chart.
A little bit. A little bit.
Raised it all out.
And there are, and actually I don't have it up on this computer, but I will, we'll open next week with a little bit of that. But I want everybody to stay safe, to stay healthy. As I mentioned, I have to leave early to do a funeral right now over at Eden. And again, not a funeral for somebody who passed away from what we know, but unfortunately the funeral got rearranged because of this. Again, please keep in touch with us. Let us know if we need anything for the coming days. We have a class tomorrow night at 7 online, the Torah study class. We're looking at Shmini, which is another interesting story, dramatic story, one from Leviticus that actually has a narrative story of Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron. I'm not going to tell you what happens. Now, a lot of you know what happens, but that's 7. And then on Friday night, we'll have our service will be up at 5 and 8 o'clock. And we will be having another special class next week, sometime next week. We're going to do a special look at Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors, the sayings, the values of our ancestors. My favorite section, most people's favorite section of the Talmud. Great lessons that we are supposed to read at this time of year. So from Passover to Shavuot, we're supposed to study Pirkei Avot. We're going to do it online. So we'll announce the date that we're going to do that. It's just an extra thing that we're going to be putting out there as a class that can bring people together. Not Torah, not Midrash, Talmud, but without scaring people about it. It's Talmud that's very accessible. We've studied it. We studied it years ago. It's what you're supposed to study during this time anyways, and I promise you'll really, really will enjoy it. You can look at it now if you want to look at ethics of our fathers, ethics of our ancestors, sayings of our fathers, chapters of our fathers, lots of different translations, but it's a great section.
Yeah. Mary and I were there when you started Pirkei Avot many years ago, and it was great.
You guys were there. It's really, really cool, and it's a great tradition that we celebrate these weeks of anticipation for Shavuot with again, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you again. We want to wish Reverend Lynn a great rest of
Easter week.
Holy period, right? This is a
Great 50 days.
Holy period. So again, thank you for being part of our class, everybody, today, and stay well, stay healthy, everybody.
Bonnie is counting the Omer on Facebook.
Oh, that's true. It's we mentioned a couple days ago, as we go through the Omer, and again, some of you can have a calendar. You can download your own Omer calendars. Again, today is technically the 5th day. We started last night, the 5th day of the Omer. So Hayom Yom Chamishi LaOmer. This is the 5th day of the Omer period, and the Omer period is when we study again Pirkei Avot. So please stay healthy during this period, this countdown. We hope that the countdown exceeds our time in quarantine, I guess. All right. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.